Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Happiness Journey with Dr. Dan podcast, where every journey is worth living. My name is Dr. Dan, and I'm your host for today's episode. I'm a bilingual neurolinguistic programming and cognitive behavior psychotherapist specializing in anger management issues, both court-appointed and private, marriage counseling using the EFT method, dissociative disorders, narcissistic personality disorders, depression, anxiety, dream analysis, and also provide life, business, and retirement coaching support. I provide individual one-on-one session in both French or English and also do group settings. If you need any assistance, reach out to DMB therapy and coaching services at 301-325-1550, and our website can be found at lifecoachddanamzallag.com. Today, I'm very excited to have for our 7th episode of season 22, a very special guest and trauma survivor, Linn Rivers. And just like every of my past episode, I will leave it up to the guests to properly introduce themselves, as no one can do a better job. Linn, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much for having me. It's really interesting to hear the word trauma survivor, because I was trying to think like, what's a better way of explaining that? But the reality is I have been through a bulk of different traumas, right? From the time that I came into this life to, my mid 30s, it was just a consistent flow of traumatic experiences. I've lost all of my family members. I've lost a partner of the same cancer that my mom died of when I was 15. I was chronically ill as a child, in and out of the hospitals, just a bunch of different consistent things that just kept going over and over. And then it created this pattern of me recreating losses every 2 years. And I mean, there's so much to get into, and I'm sure we will, but it's just a little piece of information that, I did have to overcome so much and on my own as well.
Okay. And now for you, when it comes to the type of trauma that you've experienced before in the past, what would you say was the one that affected you the most, Linn? I mean, because obviously when we talk about PTSD and we have also PTRS, which is post-traumatic relationship syndrome. So trauma is a very broad term. Which one do you feel has been following you through life and has been affecting you the most?
That is a really difficult thing to say, because I used to think it would have been my mom dying when I was 15, because of where I was already at that point in my life. I already had PTSD. I'd already lost the majority of my family. And here I am losing the most important person in my life. But then in my 20s, I lost my partner at the same time that I was dying from my organs shutting down. And that was a really traumatic experience that just kept going. And I think it kept going because I had a sense of who I was at that point in my life. Right. And so I was able to comprehend everything that was happening and able to sort through it in a bunch of different ways. But I kept processing it because I knew, like, I need to keep processing. I need to keep processing. And then it just became this habitual thing of over processing. And I think that actually took me down this really long journey of self-sabotaging, but there's also the point of the things that really set me up for having to work through so much were the things that happened when I was a child. And a lot of people don't comprehend the fact that when we're an infant, the things that happen to us can actually really shake our foundation. I think it's before the age of 8. That is what's molding our neurological system, right? And so that is like kind of what sets our path forward. And being deathly ill when I was 1 and 3 and feeling the pain that came from my family through that is actually what initiated a PTSD and fear surrounding the word love. I was terrified of the word love from the age of 4. I remember this feeling every time someone would say, I love you, I would cringe and I would get anxious. And I remember the way that it felt. And I would never say, I love you back. It was something that I was very adamant about. And when my grandmother, who was the most important person in my life when I was a child, when I was 8, I said, I love you for the first time. And that's when she took her last breath. And as a 8-year-old, we have narcissistic tendencies to think this is happening because of me or to me. And so I thought I killed my grandma. And so that one thing right there put me on this path of fearing actually loving deeply. And I never said I love you to another family member until I was in my late 20s, when my grandpa, the last person in my life, was sick. And I thought, I need him to know that I love him. And that's where I was able to sort through things. But it was those moments as a child that really shaped this person, this fearful person that I was in my 20s, And so I think when I look at it, it's hard to pick this one fine line piece of traumatic experiences, but I think the childhood ones really set a tone that I had to unpack and unlearn. And I still have these fears, right? The PTSD never goes away, but I'm aware of those thought patterns. I'm aware of what they mean, where they stem from. And so I live my life fully. I enjoy my life with the notion that still, like, every single turn I take in life, I might die, or this might happen, or, like, I have those awarenesses at every single turn, but I move forward with it. Right. But for the majority of my life, I didn't. I had this pattern of just, creating scenarios that felt the same way as when I was a child. And that included relationships, that included scenarios with work and all of these different aspects of life. And so I think it's just this where did it really start from? It's what's the worst and what's the easiest? It's really hard to say.
Now, when it comes to relationship aspect, I mean, in what you're actually dealing with today, are you able to connect with people in an emotional and physical way, or do you still cringe when someone tells you, I love you, or whatever it is? How's your reaction now after what you've experienced 20 some years ago?
Okay, well, this is a twofold question because yes, I am one of the deepest lovers that I know. I do everything with love. And I think it's because I've had multiple near-death experiences. And so being here, I'm just like, I'm going to do everything fully. And so I love with all of my heart and soul. However, with relationships, it's for me, I kept putting myself in situations where I was not going to love the person deeply. And I did in my late 20s, I guess you would say, like mid 20s, late 20s. And she died of the same cancer that my mom ended up dying of. And so that for me was like this moment of, I allowed someone to come in who I actually had a beautiful connection with, and they died. And that set me back on this path of don't let people in who I'm actually going to love. So I kept recreating relationships where it was just baseline. It wasn't, deep. It didn't go anywhere, and it would end within a few months. And it took me a long time to realize that pattern. But what it turned into was self-love. I had to learn, why am I doing this? Why do I keep recreating these scenarios? And why do I keep limiting myself when it comes to these connections? Because I kept putting myself in situations with people that I genuinely didn't like.
Mhm.
It's easy to love someone because they're human. Like,
Yeah.
I can love a human being because I understand their journey in this life. Like, being a human is not easy. And so I can love someone, but to like a person, that is where it's like really that's where a deep love comes in, right? When you actually like a person and can move forward with them. And that for me has been the journey of 7 years of being single. So I can understand that within myself of, this is why I was creating these scenarios. This is why I was putting myself in situations that didn't feel good, right? Because I wanted that heartbreak over again. And I didn't want to love too deeply, because the more you love, the more painful the loss is going
Yeah,
to be.
that's correct. It's a
And
disappointment as well.
yes. And so that is what drove me. And now at this point, I'm very sure when I'm interested in someone, I sit with it for a good chunk of time. I don't just do the jump in and pretend everything's great. And then 2 months later, I don't do that anymore. I'm very intentional because I fell in love with myself through the process of that healing and being alone.
Mhm.
Because I think the more we keep jumping into situations that don't really serve us, we're
Correct.
never going to learn what it is that's causing those in the first place. And so through my own self-love, I learned how to actually love people and to be in situations that are loving.
But do you feel that now, because of how many people are single and alone or lonely or whatever, Lynn, do you feel that they forego this very thorough analysis in terms of who they should invest their time and energy on? And because of that, because they're afraid to say, well, if I don't jump in that opportunity right now, someone else will, and I will continue being alone. I will continue living my life in loneliness. So where's the right balance where people say, well, I either invest partially and take a risk, or just be so finicky and over analyzing every relationship, end up with nothing. So where's the right balance?
That's a beautiful question. And that's something that I really had to understand for myself, because I did become that finicky person where one thing would throw me off.
Mhm.
But the reality is, I think we do need to be okay with being alone. And I think the majority of the population is not okay with being alone. And that is why there are so many people who are stuck in relationships that are mediocre and just are comfort levels for people. They're not the end all be all. It's not what they actually want from a connection, but it is that fear of being alone that keeps people in those situations. So I do think that it's important for people to learn to be alone. But that's a big step, and one that someone has to really be willing to take.
Mhm.
And the second that you enter that state of, okay, I want better for myself, that is when everything starts coming together, and you realize you can't be in just any relationship. And each relationship becomes shorter and shorter as you're navigating that, right? Because you do start seeing these red flags of, oh, this is a pattern of mine. This is something that I just keep putting myself in because of something that happened, 20 years ago, or whatever the situation is. And so I think we do need to be able to sit with ourselves enough to know that we deserve to have what we desire in a connection. And there are millions of people in this world, which means there is someone who's going to line up to us. And I'm big on vibrational alignment. And I think that if you are the person that you want to be and the person that you want to attract, you're going to start attracting that.
Mhm.
And that's where you start letting people in. But it doesn't have to be a relationship right off the bat. Be friends, learn to communicate with people, get to learn people, and just enjoy the journey of getting to know people on a base level, right? And then you learn where you don't have to jump into this relationship and then make it something messy and ended just a few months later. If you would just take your time and get to know people for being people. I think we have this idea that everything has to be right here, right now. And trust me, I'm one of the most impatient people that I know. And that's patience is always going to be one of the things that I navigate. But when we can learn to just be like, hey, let's just get to know each other. We don't have to make this romantic. We don't have to jump into anything. You get to learn about people really quickly as a friend just through conversations, because they might say something about someone else who's like, oh, that's something that I tend to attract in people, where they might just be having a conversation and this person might mention someone else and they might say something in a way that shows, oh, this is their insecurity. This is what they haven't worked through. You get to learn about people and their patterns and where they are, and meet them where they are, and to see in that moment that, okay, they're a great person, but we're not in alignment with each other romantically. So this is great. We can be friends, but we don't have to take it any further. And I think that's the beauty, that's the balance of just allowing people into your life, but not having it to fit this. You don't have to make it fit this mold of what you think it should be right here, right now.
Mhm.
And it's that long game, right? If you want something beautiful, take your time with it, take it slow, and see what it is before you dive into this, potential pattern.
Yeah, but don't you think as well, Lynn, that we are in a society that unfortunately does not um, promote patience. It promotes primarily instant gratification. So we
Mm-hmm.
always have everything at our fingertips, swiping
Mm-hmm.
right, seeing really, people that are attractive, not attractive, or not too attractive, or not too little attractive, whatever. And at the end is that how can we change our mindset or our perspective when it comes to looking at it in with your strategy, with your approach? Because now it's like, well, why waste my time? If let's say you start investing time,
Mm-hmm.
someone that may mislead you, then this
Mm-hmm.
experience will push you to say, well, I don't have time for that crap anymore. I don't have time to invest my time and to get to know the person in a deep level. For them,
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of like, okay, do we have the attraction? Do we have the base model that allows
Mm-hmm.
you to decide if this is a person that I'd like to be able to pursue it or not? But then it takes two to tango. You may have the right intention, but the other person may not. So then
Mm-hmm.
you're always going to have 50% of
Mm-hmm.
the way to conduct yourself in a very ethical way, in a very, I would say, loving way, but the other person may be malicious. So how do you eliminate those situations from happening?
That's just it, right? You can't eliminate those because again, people are going to do what they're going to do. So if one party is like super interested and the other one's like, oh great, I'm just going to have fun with this, and they never communicate that, eventually it's just going to come to head. And that's again with time. Like you're not going to realize it with time anyway. So why jump in and figure that out 3 months down the road versus take your time with it and still figure it out 3 months down the road, right? It comes down to self-consciousness and being aware of the fact that we do live in a fast-paced society and everything's at our fingertips, and it's that instant gratification. Being aware of that is like one of the biggest first steps that you can take. And then learning how to disengage from that lifestyle and to remove yourself from that. Because unfortunately, we can blame everything on our technology and all of the things that we use and everything, but it comes down to you. You're the only one in charge of your life. You're the one that has control over what you do and what you say, how you respond, how you react. And those are the things that we need to hone in on. We need to learn, like, why am I doing this? Why do I keep putting myself in these situations? It's not the people that are doing this to you. You keep putting yourself in these situations, and you need to ask yourself why. And if you take your time to get to know someone, one way or the other, you're going to figure out if they're a great match for you or not. And my personal belief is there's not a better foundation for a relationship than a friendship. If you can't be friends with the person that you're going to engage romantically, you might want to think twice about this, right? Because we are biological creatures, and a lot of the drive is reproduction. A lot of people are attracted to each other for reproductive purposes, and a lot of people cannot look outside of that. That, okay, if I was not physically attracted to this guy, would I actually want to date him? Chances are no, but you're letting your body drive you, and you think you should be having babies and you should start a family and all of these things. And you're using that as a foundation to move into a relationship, not actually this, oh, this person is really amazing. They take good care of themselves. They have, all these qualities that I want. We tend to ignore those things, right? And so we just jump in versus, hey, let's take the time to get to know each other and literally not make anything about the romance, but who are you as a person?
Mhm.
How do you respond to these situations? What do you do with your life? What do you do with your free time? But the bigger picture there again is, what are you doing with your free time? What are you doing with your life? And where do you want to go? Are you creating your life for you? Or are you just looking for someone to fill a void that makes you feel more comfortable
Right.
just having someone around,
But at the same time, if the definition of insanity says doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different result, and
Mm-hmm.
people understand this definition, but yet keep falling and doing or making the same mistake, when are they ever going to learn? I mean, do they need to be able to redefine what insanity means to them? Because again, if let's say they make a mistake and it's a different nature of mistake, it may have some similarity, but it's not
Mm-hmm.
exactly the same. Would they say that I've been repeating the same actions and behavior for it to render the exact same result, but yet I was expecting something different? I mean, again, a lot of people will say, well, maybe I mistreated him. Maybe I was disrespectful. Maybe I was this, I was that. Maybe it was my fault. People will point finger at themselves. So does that mean again that they're gonna go and seek a similar type of guy or woman and not realize that they're falling exactly in the same trap?
I mean, the reality is we do tend to do that over and over and over again until we genuinely self-analyze and know ourselves well, right? And I think that's where it comes into play, that knowing yourself and spending time alone and actually finding your passions and what it is you like to do in life. That is where we start breaking the mold, because we start enjoying life. We start enjoying lives for ourselves and by ourselves and doing things that bring us joy. We go out and we spend time with other people and we do all these, like for myself, it's pickleball and rock climbing and volleyball. Those are things that I enjoy spending time doing. And so I go out and I do them. And then I come home and I feel fulfilled. I feel like I did things for myself that made me feel happy. And those are the things that matters. And when you're happy, that is when we start asking the questions of, does this person bring me more joy to my life, or does it take away from it? Because the reality is, when you're happy in life with where you are, the only things that you're going to start inviting in are things that make you feel better, Because if it's making you feel worse, you're going to recognize that. You're going to start acknowledging, like, I don't feel so good when I'm around this person, and then like I was saying earlier, then those relationships start shortening. It's like, okay, I realize this 3 months in. Next one, okay, I realize this 2 months in. And then you get to a point where it takes you a week to realize that there are certain patterns showing very quickly, and you don't go very deep with this person. You like, okay, I'm going to cut this off now because I see what I'm inviting in. And then you have to rewrite. Our neurological programming is so defined from all of these patterns, and we have to rework them. We have to rewire our system to know what it is that we actually want. And it's a process. It's not an overnight transition. It's something that we have to keep working towards. And the longer someone takes to acknowledge these patterns and to rebuild them, because a lot of people, they'll be in relationships for years. They knew months before, right? They knew months into the relationship that this wasn't a good fit, but they don't get out of it because they're afraid of being alone. They're afraid that there's not going to be somebody else out there. And again, it just comes down to, you're the only person you're going to spend the rest of your life with indefinitely. So you need to make yourself happy. Right.
Yes.
And I just really believe that it comes down to doing the work. And yes, like let's be realistic. Everyone's at their own journey. They're going to learn at their own at their own pace. But starting is the key, right? And again, it's just a step-by-step process. And I really think that that's all it takes, is to allow yourself to be self-aware and to sit with those things when they come up, and to unpack them, not just like, okay, great, I realize I attract this narcissistic personality. Let me get into a new relationship.
Yes.
Sit with it for a few months, sit with it and understand, like, wow, like I actually see what I was calling in. And what is it about me that's attracting that? What am I putting out there that is attracting this type of person? Because you're not attracting them by accident. There's something about your personality that is attracting that person.
Absolutely. But those who actually dealt with similar trauma as you, if you would have to give them some recommendation or some advice, what would be the one that could actually, that they can learn from this podcast and basically start changing their actions and behavior and start really taking the time to know themselves better, to know exactly what triggers them, to know what really bothers them. So whenever a situation do arise, they'll be able to say, here are the signs. I know exactly how to strategize them and how to be able to avoid making some mistake over again. So what would you recommend them?
I think one of the best things for people who are just starting out is journaling. And I say journaling because when you are writing out your thought processes, when you're writing out everything that's happened, even your daily activities, right? Like today I did this and I felt angry or aggressive or depressed when XYZ happened. You can start pinpointing where these things are happening, because a lot of the times when we get into a depressive state or when something triggers us, it's not the actual circumstance that happened that's causing that reaction. It's a pattern that's just coming up because something triggered it that made it feel like the past. And so I think for myself, I started journaling very early on in my 20s. And that is where I started acknowledging, like, oh, this is what I do when the situation happens. And this is something that I don't like. I don't enjoy this about myself. I don't like responding to in this situation. Why does this make me cry? When they didn't mean anything by it, and it really comes down to, again, understanding your responses and your reactions to a situation, because those are what we're always going to be seeking. We're going to be seeking those situations that cause that neurological response, because that's what we know, that's what we're programmed on right now, and we need to reprogram that in order to create something new. So I think journaling is one of the best ways, and doing it when you're alone. Turn off your phone, be okay with being alone, sit in a room for a couple of hours if you have to, by yourself, and see what comes up, because it can get really uncomfortable and you're going to have to sit through that discomfort in order to move through it. A lot of people do not know how to be alone without any kind of technology, without silence is scary for them.
It is absolutely. So do you help people like who actually comes to you, Lynn, and who have experienced something similar? Do you give them some advice like outside of, I mean, is this your job to be able to help people or trauma survivors?
Yes, so I actually do coaching, and I took a break from it for a little while, and I did photography for a few years because I needed to just reset and actually get back into my own body after the last near-death experience that I had. And I just wanted to reset and do things that felt light and fun. And I actually just recently stepped back into coaching, and I help a lot of people through different traumatic experiences really find themselves in order to live a truly happy and fulfilling existence.
So if you could tell our listeners before we conclude this podcast, where can they find you? I mean, do you have a website? Do you have like any other social media account that they can actually reach out to?
I do, yes. It's actually www.linnrivers.com, and that's Linn rivers.com. And that's, you can get in contact with me through there if you're interested in coaching.
Beautiful. Well, Linn, that is all the time that we have for today's podcast. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us. And thank you again for participating and inspiring our many listeners with your incredible story. Now, we hope that you've all enjoyed today's episode. And I'm also very excited about the many upcoming guests that we have scheduled for season 22 of the Happiness Journey podcast, filled with inspirational stories just like the one that you listened today. Now, here are some concluding words of wisdom. Trauma survivors embody incredible strength and resilience, overcoming challenges that might seem unsurmountable to others. Every day is a testament to their courage and determination to heal and thrive. The journey is difficult. Each step forward is a victory. Remember, your past does not define you, but your perseverance and spirit does. You're not alone. There's a community of support ready to uplift you. Embrace your story and the power within you to create a brighter future. You are a survivor, and your journey is a beacon of hope for many others out there. Keep moving forward one day at a time, and you all enjoy your 4th of July. My name is Dr. Dan Mzallag, and you may all keep pursuing your amazing journey in life.